Alright, so here we are in the beginning of the gameplay, and I just wanted to note that the dialogue here was one of our efforts to add a little humanity to all our antagonists. There's just a little exchange here where the Geth flight leader um, kind of gives some advice to his students, and we like to have a little bit of a story behind even the sort of red shirt opponents, just so you can feel like each of them has their own history, and so you feel a little worse killing them. That's what we want. We want you to feel like a monster. Um, I actually, since our Quantum Delta is dueling with these scimitars here, I want to hand it over to the E right off the bat, just to talk about the scimitar from a player perspective and our struggle to kind of make it less irritating.
Okay, the Scimitar had various problems. From the perspective of a player, it has various problems. Its physics are all over the place. It is um, uh, it wobbles around basically uncontrollably, and using it in a mission is, at least for me, it's punishment, um, pure and utter punishment. Because it's very difficult to get your shots to line up and to get a to get to land hits on the more maneuverable fighters. The Federation uses more commonly, like the Ulan or the Kentauri. Um, it's hell, basically pure and utter hell. We didn't do much in terms of making it easier to fly. Instead of we decided that we weren't going to inflict this craft on the player anywhere, which is one of the best decisions we've made so far in terms as far as I'm concerned. Um, yeah. Back to you.
Right. So here we are, moving. We're done with the opening skirmish, and we're moving into this long dialogue sequence. And as I think the E will talk about a bit later, this mission is really talky. I don't think we would ever make a mission this talky again. Uh, and I think the only reason this one works is because it's so early in the campaign, where you can get away with a little less narrative inertia. Even so, if I were to redo this mission from scratch, it would have probably about half as much dialogue. So now that we've talked about the Scimitar, the Gef ship, I do want to talk about the Gefs, the Gaian effort, a little, and their inspiration. They were present way back in the War in Heaven Alpha, and they're actually, according to Darius, they go back as far as the Blue Planet's roots as actually Inferno fanfiction, um, where they were a radical eco-terrorist group protesting the strip mining of Mars to create Inferno's huge glass cannon juggernaut for the Earth Alliance. And in the War in Heaven Alpha, they didn't have much depth. They were basically this eco-terrorist faction that lived in the Kuiper Belt. They popped up out of nowhere to give you trouble. And moving into our final release, we knew we wanted to give them a lot more depth. So what the GIFs are, they're actually very interesting if you read the tech room entry. They were inspired by a novel I read a while back by a collaboration between three science fiction writers who I used to like a great deal, and I still respect. David Brin, Greg Bear, and Greg Benford. And the novel was called Heart of the Comet, and it was about it was this sort of hard SF saga about colonizing Halley's Comet, and how difficult it would be. And the Gefs are this whole society. They are sort of an eco-terrorist faction, but they're more than that. They believe that the destiny of human civilization is to move back to its cometary roots, if you believe that account of the origin of the amino acids that eventually gave rise to life on Earth, and eventually spread throughout the galaxy instead of using subspace by just drifting around on comets. And they're perhaps not the most menacing opponents compared to the Alliance, but we did want them to have their own philosophy that you could respect, even if you don't necessarily respect their piloting abilities. And there are a lot of them out there. There are a lot of Gaian effort habitats. They're pretty well industrialized just because of the nature of having to live out there. So speaking of Gefs, here we're moving out to find the Gef pilot, the survivor, um, which finally is basically the first point of action in this mission since the opening skirmish. And I want to turn it over to the E to talk a bit about the role-playing choice element, which I think is basically a first for free space campaigns, or pretty close to.
Yeah. Um, as Battuta noted earlier, this mission is very talky. It's very dialogue heavy, and as you can see by the mission time counter, um, we're already 6.5 minutes into the mission, and about 5.5 of those minutes have been nothing but dialogue and nothing but waiting for the marine transport to dock with the freighter. Um, so this is basically here to give you something to do, give you something, give you more, give the Gevs another bit of characterization, and most importantly to give you a bit of a window into Brie, Casim, and of course Laporte. Um, what's coming up here is the first real command decision Laporte has to make, um, especially later when the GEF task force jumps in. And what we wanted to set up here is that Laporte is fundamentally different from B and Kasim and the other more traditional Ubuntu people. Um, she doesn't. I don't want to say that she has no inhibitions about killing innocents, but she's certainly more comfortable with the thought of being pragmatic when it comes to facing down threats to her and to the people she cares about. Um, QD here, I think he's going to attack them outright instead of going for all the other dialogue options given here. Personally, I'm usually much more of a coward. I usually go for the threatening route. That is, threaten them and force the Gevs into a stalemate until the relief force arrives. Um, yeah. Battuta, anything you want to say?
Just that this was basically hell to thread and debug. This was one of my first missions, and it was a very adventurous mission. It was difficult. I had never used a lot of these mechanics before, key presses and stuff like that. Um, so I'm glad I tackled the challenge. I ended up being much more comfortable with this. Looking back, this is an incredibly basic choice compared to some of the stuff we did later, like the dialogue trees in Mission 8. Uh, what else do I want to say about this? There were bugs in this choice system right up until uh, like days before release. There are probably still some. And that has to do not so much with the fact that it's incredibly complicated, but that because I was bad at threading when I threaded it. So it became sort of complex. Um, and they touched a bit on the character stuff being revealed here. And this is Kasim's actual last in-game appearance in terms of having any meaningful dialogue or impact in a mission as a character. Um, and there are just some hints as to some deeper stuff going in his psyche here. But I was never totally satisfied with this mission. Um, I feel like in free space you really need to make sure that all the important stuff happens in-game, and we didn't manage that with Kasim. His final breakdown occurs off-screen. Not off-screen, but it's narrated in the fiction viewer. And I wish we'd gotten it to happen in mission. Um, and if we'd been better with our design, if I'd been better with design, this is completely my fault. We could have arranged for that to happen in a mission, and we didn't pull it off, which is one of my great regrets about this first act. So here is Quantum Delta going in to attack the Geths. Again, if this mission had been one I'd threaded later, I doubt he'd be having such an easy time of it, though it is worth pointing out that their AI class is not great. So for those of you who've only taken one path on this mission and retried it, there are a number of different approaches you can take. If you choose to take the hostage and then execute her, the Geths will attack you because they're so shaken. Their AI class actually drops really low, And if you're good, you won't have as much trouble with them. Quantum Delta seems to have found a way to exploit my admittedly clumsy fretting here. That or he's just a total badass, which is, also a possibility. Um, and has taken just about everything out. He's managed to scan the Argo there. There's an interesting bit of information, which explains a bit about exactly what's going on here with the Nauticus. I should mention the Nauticus's cargo, for those of you who did not pay attention to what it is or didn't check the events log, is also a bit of a hint for something you'll see in Release 2. I think it's mentioned later in the campaign in Mission 7, I think. Dee, is there anything you want to throw in before we hit the end of gameplay? I do want to talk a bit about Karen, who showed up here to save the day.
No, I think Karen is the most interesting thing that is going to happen here, so let's talk about her.
Right. So Karen is one of very few characters that I actually introduced myself, rather than working with Darius on. The very first mission that was ever fretted for the redone War in Heaven campaign after the alpha was actually Delenda-est, Mission 15. If you haven't played it already, you should stop listening to this because I'm going to spoil it. And I fretted that mission with a few extra characters in it, most of whom I thought at the time were going to be throwaways. But I realized, given what happens at the end of Delenda-est, we needed some emotional attachment to some of these characters. So I realized we had to bring them earlier in the campaign. So Karen has a very interesting history. She's actually sort of the Obi-Wan of War in Heaven. She was sort of, to Sims, what Sims is to Laporte, sort of this maternal figure when she was younger. Really kicked Sims into shape and made her what she is today. And now she's sort of this, she's a warrior, but she's very emblematic of Ubuntu in that she's behind the scenes pulling the strings, focusing not on just the skills of her pilots, but on the relationships between them and sort of making them into this coherent fighting force, which is what Ubuntu is. If you actually look it up, Ubuntu means it's African and it's about the relationships between people. That's what they focus on. So Karen, very interesting character. I would love to do more fiction with her. She is sort of formative for many of these characters, and yet that doesn't always shine through. All right, we're coming up to the end here. And again, we've got a weighty debriefing. And I'm glad Quantum Delta is making use of those recommendations. Okay, I think that's it.